Well, welcome everybody to the American Space Museum. I'm Mark Marquette. We're so glad you're with us today to stay curious. Today we've got Gary Allgire with us, a great friend of the museum. He was doing some docing today, and I said, Gary, I got an idea.
Yeah,
How you doing,
doing
buddy?
fine, sir. How about you?
Well, great. Of course, those of you that have met Gary before know he's a wealth of information about the Apollo program and the shuttle program. That he was a construction engineer,
A structural engineer.
structural engineer.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. And define that. What's a structural engineer?
Well, I owned everything that didn't have electronics going through it or fluids going through it.
There you go.
So
I like
that was the
thinking
easy
about
way to
that.
qualify that.
The stuff you could kick like a tire or
Yes,
the
yeah.
sidewall or something.
It gives
in
us a
there.
lot bigger picture of what was going on when you have that kind of
Well, Gary's a
thing.
wealth of knowledge and he loves to share it and has been for a year now on Stay Curious. About a
Mhm.
year ago to the day, you did a program with us. He's a snowbird. He goes up in his beautiful resort home up in the Georgia mountains. And
Blairsville, Georgia.
you also like, what other hobbies you like to do?
Well, I like to ride motorcycles and race motor. Well, I used to race motorcycles. I don't do it anymore. I'm too old for that.
Well, I told you Dan McCune, shuttle crane operator, was in here yesterday and said hi to you.
Oh yeah, great guy.
Yep, Dan's been on our show, and we'll have him back. But great to have you. Tell us a little bit about we're going today, folks. I'll set this up. Start asking questions to Gary. Something that you've been gnawing at you about the Apollo era, or something about the space shuttle. Not to try to trip you up, but because I doubt if anyone can do that.
Well, I
But
don't know.
he's a wealth of knowledge, and we love sitting down with Gary. And today I said, you know what? I had an idea for a program, but why don't you just come on and kick off what we're going to call open mic question and answer. We even made a meme up there for it. Uh, and join in our conversation with this NASA expert. As you know, we celebrate the spacewalkers here, and Marty will be there looking for your questions to pop up there. We're going to talk about the X-37B a little bit. Gary's got a lot of experience in the top secret world of DoD missions, but virtually no experience in uncrewed missions. Everything you did had to do with human beings going to
That's
space,
correct.
right?
Yeah, no candlesticks.
No candlesticks.
That's what we call the unmanned launch vehicles, candlesticks.
I see. Well, those noisy candlesticks have been keeping your dogs and animals
Oh
up
yeah,
all
they
night
go
long.
about every other night. They're launching one now.
What do you think about what's going on? A new record setting. I forget how many. I'll have to add up. It's in the 70s. The launches are
You
going to
know,
have this year.
that's absolutely amazing. Towards the end of my career, NASA wanted to do something like what Elon's doing. They wanted to turn it into more of a commercial uh, endeavor. Just like when we first started flying airplanes, we had to get the private industry involved to get it to grow. And Elon has answered that with big time. And I guess Jeff Bezos will eventually get there too. But it's been absolutely amazing. He's going to launch almost 100 of them this year. They're in the 90s now.
Yes, between
And
the two coasts.
two coasts, yes. So that's amazing. It really is.
And the rhythm of it is just
Yeah.
uncanny. Of course, he's launching his own Starlink satellite systems,
Yes.
but he's going to launch Bezos's
Yeah.
competitor next
Yeah.
week. I understand.
Yeah.
Because his new Glenn rocket's not ready.
No, it's been. I don't know what's holding that up, but they've had a lot of issues. But Elon, he had the right things to go. He knew what he was doing, and to land those first stages back here at the Space Center or out on the ocean, it was amazing. I didn't think that could ever be done, and sure enough, he has pulled that off.
Hmm. Well, Marty, you let me know if we have someone asking some questions here. And I grabbed my wrong sheet, Marty, of my pictures of my
And
script.
I think we have a question to ask the audience.
Yeah, we do have a question to ask the audience. Thank you, Marty.
And
We do have a question we're going to ask the audience, and that question is, Gary, you ask the question.
which shuttle which was the only shuttle that has ever flown west? And we'll have the answer at the end of the program. And if you can guess that, you get an attaboy. Boy.
Now, attaboy, and I'll
attagirl.
I'll send you some swag. I promise you. I'll send you a space flown Swatch payload Bayliner.
Okay.
What shuttle flew west? No, wait a minute.
No fear looking it up.
Yeah.
No fair looking it up, Marty says, okay? And he's got the UCAC microphone there to shout you out there. Well, gee, that would defy the laws of physics, Gary, but
Yeah.
I'll think about that and see if someone has that answer there.
Well, if it ever, yeah.
Gary wanted to just tell us a little bit about where you grew up.
Well, I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, just outside of St. Louis, a town called Florissant.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of people mispronounce it. They call it fluorescent, not fluorescent. And,
Headquarters of McDonald that built the Mercury and Gemini
yes,
spacecraft.
That's correct. My dad worked he was a supervisor of machines shop, and he worked a little bit on the Gemini and on the Mercury capsules.
Really?
So,
I know machine shop guys. I had a couple of friends. They're dealing with 30 thousandths of an inch all day long.
Yes, they are. And then my mom worked for him. My brother worked for him. My uncles worked for him. But I wasn't.
Excuse me.
I interviewed, but I said I'm not working out here.
Okay.
So got an opportunity to interview with NASA when they came on campus. And
which campus?
I was going to a little school called Parks College, which is an aeronautical school. It was at the time it was an all male school, and it was unique about it is it had you were in a 3-year graduation curriculum instead of a 4-year, but that meant we went to school all year round. We got I think the 4 weeks off in August and maybe a week off for Christmas. So and we carried quite a bit of workload. And so when I graduated from there, then I got an offer to come down to Kennedy to work. And I was in December is when I got my letter that I was accepted. And in January,
what year?
67 is when I got the notification, and I started working in January '68. Apollo 6 was my first exposure to the Apollo program.
Wow, that's interesting stuff. And of course, '68 is such a seminal year with Apollo 8 orbiting the moon. In 1968, Christmas Eve, we've also got Apollo 17, the end of the Apollo program, coming up here in December. So you've always loved the space and stuff, and being part of it.
I used to, when I was a little boy, when they were doing the Vanguard, I followed the Sputniks. I was 12 years old when they launched Sputnik, and I can still remember going out in the backyard at night to look and see if we could find it. Of course, we never did. And then all the disappointments during those first years when the Vanguards would blow up, the Redstones didn't work right.
MR1, Flopnik,
and then you had the MA1, the Mercury Atlas one that blew up with the astronauts watching it.
We got a piece of that in the room next door.
A piece of that is right in here.
The hatch.
Yes, the hatch. So those were disappointing years, but I always followed it through college. Always reading Aviation Week. I'd get anything I could get on the space program, but I didn't expect to ever work there. And then when I got the offer, I just didn't pass that up. My wife was disappointed, but she wanted to stay in St. Louis with her family. But I think she's
she got over that.
Yeah, she got over it.
Yeah, you get a little sand in your shoes, and you don't want to go anywhere else. Marty, you got somebody that's got a question for Gary Allgire.
No, we have an answer from Connie.
Connie McDaniel?
And she got the answer.
That's cheating.
And what's Connie's answer?
Well, to quote her, endeavor, I can't read the second word, but anyway, flew west to retire, question mark, I think.
Connie McDaniel, wow. Which space shuttle flew west? And that is the exact answer there. So we'll have to give her something special for that special lady. Thank you very much. Connie, really? Where'd you look that up at?
Let's give her free admission to the museum.
Yeah, we'll get her. There we go. Yeah. And we'll allow her to vacuum the conference room while she's here. Connie's one of our ace volunteers with Marty here. And this guy here that we're loved to have back in here, he's always given great tours. Had some people in today, I know. Here you are, been involved with our museum a long time. Because Edgar Mitchell's been gone about 10 years.
Yes.
And there's his autograph and a picture of you and him. What was the circumstances with that?
Well, he was here just like Rusty Swiker was here a couple weeks ago or last week. He was if you had your picture made with him, he charged you for it, and people would come in and get their picture and autograph. And
He needs some walk around money, huh?
yeah, I guess, yeah. But that, yeah, I worked on his mission, but I never really got to talk to him during the mission. And so he was doing a little interview with some other lady here on video, and I joined in, and then I asked him a couple of questions about the mission that I wasn't sure about, and it ended up he wasn't sure about it either. But anyway, he eventually came over to me and he says, "You want a picture?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess so." And I didn't expect anything, and sure enough, he came over with that photograph, signed it, and I didn't have to pay anything. Very nice gentleman. I really loved. I wish I got to talk to him some more.
Yes.
But,
In fact, part of that interview is on YouTube where he
yeah.
talks about the lunar Bibles
Yep.
on there, very in depth.
And he also talks about he was going to be actually he was on 14 because 13 was his original mission,
Yes.
and they because of the swapping of people and stuff. Anyway, they swapped vehicles, and he got the good vehicle, as he said, and everybody else got the bad one.
Yes,
So,
he was a big supporter of our
Yeah.
museum.
and you'll
His
hear me-
Noetic Institute of Paranormal Activities
yeah.
lives on. One of his legacies that was kind of an odd asterisk to the whole
Yeah.
Apollo program, trying to do ESP experiments from the moon.
Okay.
That's what I would like to talk
If
to
you
him about.
listen to that video you just talked about on YouTube, I'm on it. If you'll hear me in there in the background, and the question
I just put that together that
Yeah.
that was you on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we never talked about that
the
before.
question I asked them is what they did with the docking probe and the drogue. I couldn't quite remember. There was one rumor that they brought one back, and I wasn't sure. And he thought that it stayed with the lunar module when they undocked for the final time.
They had trouble with it.
It had
docking.
trouble.
It
It
had
had
8 or 9 attempts
to get
yeah.
to it. Anyway, they did bring back the probe and the drogue, and they took it back to Downey where it was manufactured. And they did a bunch of testing, and they never could get it quite to repeat. They did one time out of the hundreds of times that they tested that. They did, if they laid it horizontally and put a little side load on it, they'd get it where it wouldn't lock. So,
Yep, that's a legacy of the Apollo 14 mission, February 1971. Underestimated mission of how it put NASA back on track after the near
yeah,
fatal Apollo 13.
He was worried because if that had failed and he couldn't have docked, 13 and 14 back to back would have been very, very hard on detrimental to the program. So he was very concerned.
Absolutely. Great guy we're talking about there, Edgar Mitchell,
Yeah.
and a good friend of the museum. Here's just by way of saying thank you for all your help. Here is our Gemini monument out there with the Gemini 12 paver of Lovell and Aldrin. Of course, Jim Lovell, the oldest living astronaut at age 95 right now. Losing his buddy Frank Borman about a month ago.
Yeah.
You've been involved with this a long time. Tell people about what this means to space workers to have your name out there and things like that that we talk about constantly to our tourists.
It's an honor because nobody really outside of the space people that are here don't know who we were and what we really did on the Apollo program and the shuttle program and the Gemini. Because I wasn't here; I was still in high school. And started college during the Gemini program, but there's a lot. It's a lot of work for us to come out to do this. You're under a lot of stress. People don't realize how much stress that the engineers are and the technicians and our quality people to meet schedule, to have equipment that fails on you. You got to repair it. You got to understand it. And then you have all this, plus you have Congress against you, sort of, because they were always wanting to cut our budgets down. So, when after a launch, you've asked this question to a lady that was here that did the blankets. What did you say after each launch? And I said this, we all said it when we walked back into the office especially after shuttle launches, and said, well, we got another job. We got a job till the next launch.
Yeah.
And we just worked from launch to launch, and that's not a really good atmosphere. And our center director at that time was Richard Smith, and somehow he got word of that, so he called over all the NASA people into the training auditorium, and he talked about that. He says if we will have an accident, it's the law of averages somewhere down there says we will have one. If we do, we will recover we'll study what happened, we will fix what happened, and we will launch again. So you will have a job.
Okay.
Okay.
Reassuring.
That was
Richard
reassuring.
Smith.
Yes.
That's
And
it, Mr.
unfortunately, after Challenger, he lost his job.
Wow.
I mean, it's very ironic and it's a shame, but I felt he was a
That
very
is
good
ironic for sure.
center director.
Huh. Well, the pride in their craft is what always strikes me about the space worker and doing something that no one else has done before. I'm in the presence of two national treasures here, Marty Winkle and Gary Allgire, and what we're all about is sharing this information with you. Marty, we got any questions pop up with Gary yet?
No.
Okay. Well, let's do another little special feature on our Stay Curious program. And I'm going to put my hat on to this special fella here. Happy birthday to Mr. Bruce Melnick, who is 74 years young today. First Coast Guard astronaut. Bruce is an ASM friend, and he was born December 5th, 1949 in New York City. But he got out of there as a baby. And yeah, my hat's messing up here. I got that string in front of me. All right. Bruce, I'm doing this for you, my friend. There you go. Happy birthday to him. Born, like I said, December 5th, 1949 in New York City. But Clearwater, Florida is where he really grew up. Graduated from Clearwater High in 1967. And when he was graduating, the Miami Dolphins were in a sandlot near his high school, he said. And he's been a Miami Dolphins fan ever since. So the first Coast Guard aviator to participate in the space program. There he is orbiting the Earth. Bruce Melnick, STS-40 in October 1990 deployed Ulysses spacecraft. And then in STS-49, the maiden flight of Endeavour in May 92. And he was documenting and working the robotic arm on that infamous 3-person EVA that brought that Intelsat satellite back into cargo bay. And of course, he's pointing to his Coast Guard bumper sticker he took up to space. So happy birthday to you, Bruce Melnick, 74 years young. And a great guy, very involved with our American Space Museum from time to time. And he was the astronaut, chief astronaut for a couple years, taking over for John McBride. And then he stepped down from that. And Winston Scott's now running the astronaut encounter program at the Space Center's Visitors Complex. Okay. And we want to just mention in space history that Group 16, the Sardines, were selected. They were all getting their phone calls today from Mr. George Abbey, I believe. This was... they were announced to the world in May 1996, but it was December 5th, 1995, that they all got the calls at home. 2,400 applicants were whittled down to these 44, nicknamed the Sardines because of such a large class. They implied they were be tightly packed as sardines in a can. Includes 3 members of the fateful Columbia disaster, William McCool, David Brown, and Laurel Clark, who died in that disaster, and they all 3 received the Congressional Space Medal of Honor. Some people of note, top row up in the left is John Harrington, who's done a Stay Curious with us, Peggy Whitson, Don Pettit's on the far right. The next row, Mike Massimino's in there, Scorch Hobaugh and Willie McCool on the far right. Then you've got Sandy Magnus, the Kelly twins are in there, Mark and James, and Julie Payette, one of our favorites.
Mark and Scott.
Scott, yeah, it says James Kelly here. He's James Scott Kelly and Mark Kelly. And Joan Higginbotham, who is an Artemis astronaut. And by all accounts, the only no Peggy Whitson's still an active astronaut of this group here. So quite a group there. And 5 European countries and 2 from Canada and Japan involved in this seminal group, the Sardines, the largest astronaut class of 44 astronauts. So, well, we want to talk a little with our guest today, Gary Allgire, about the top secret space plane called X-37B. It's going to be launched Sunday. They've not released the time. Have you heard the time yet?
No, but we always get that thing from the Brevard Emergency Management.
Yes, the EOC. I
Yeah,
get that.
they'll send out a text telling us.
Yeah, they always send out a text that
Yeah.
that there's a launch to happen during the window there.
Yeah.
But here is the beautiful Falcon Heavy launch by Carlton Bailey, friend of us, one of the rocket photographers out there. That's the first one that's got the roadster of Musk's in the top up
Oh,
there
okay.
with Starman
Yeah.
that you can follow orbiting around the sun still. That Tesla is. All the battery power's dead on it, though. He should have put some solar panels in that so we could have
Well,
seen
it
it.
wouldn't be the same with his car. You know, he's proud of this car, so it's up there.
That's right. Here's what the space plane looks like in the fairing. It is could fit in the shuttle payload bay. Talk about that a little bit. Gary, you're familiar with some top secret missions. You've told me you worked on shuttle DoD missions, right?
That's correct. Now,
So what's all involved with this space plane? Just let me set it up. The launch Sunday will be the 7th of the program. We know of 2 space planes, A and B, X-37A and B. Supposedly each one has flown 3 times. This is the next to the last one. The last time it landed was November last year.
last year.
And it stayed up in space for 730 some days.
That's a long
2
time.
years.
Yeah, 2 years. Yeah. The my first exposure to this airplane was back in the shuttle days. I was asked to go to a meeting that they were proposing a new payload.
Mm-hmm.
And when I walked in there, I couldn't believe when they put this up on the screen showing it in the shuttle bay. And my first thought was, why are we launching a plane inside of a plane and a payload inside of the payload inside the plane? It didn't quite make sense to that because we really didn't understand. They didn't go through the mission profile. They just were talking about, we are going to put it in your shuttle and you're going to have to install it. So that was really my closest I had to that vehicle. It's amazing what it does. We flew STS-4, which is a DoD, which is basically a precursor to what they're doing here. We had a pallet that had a lot of experiments on it that the Air Force wanted to take up and see how it worked in space. And so it, by the way, was the first payload we ever installed at the pad. It was the very first one. And it was just a pallet. And then after we got back, we went and picked it up and took it out. And I was talking to the little Air Force captain. They had an experiment on there that looked like RTD2. And we always kind of curious what it was. You know, it was white. And it was like it had a little dome on it. And we asked the captain, so how'd that work? And he says it didn't. He says they screwed up. They forgot about what they had. When they got on orbit, there was a latch that was supposed to release. It would open up and it would do whatever it was going to do. And then it would close when they come back down. Well, they didn't vent that compartment. So the pressure was working against the latch and it could not open.
Huh.
So they did fly it later. I think it's one of the last ones that they flew on DoD, and I'm sure they had it fixed by then.
That's something of physics. The
Yeah.
atmosphere inside of anything has to be vented out if you're going to,
Yes,
or it'll be.
it was very
contain things in
critical
there.
on the shuttle. We had to vent the 3 major compartments, and they had to be. It was computerized, and we was always told if the delta pressure between the aft fuselage bulkhead and the mid body exceeded 3/4 of a square inch per square inch, it would collapse the bulkhead, and the wings would fold up, and that would be it.
My gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So.
And that's the venting slots on the side there.
The side,
So-
yeah, they had little doors
Yeah,
that open and close.
hold the model there. So, Marty's got a question from somebody, but I did as we got the
They're the-
model here.
They're the little black
The black slots there
that you see. Those are vent doors
to equalize the pressure going up and coming down.
coming back down. Yeah.
And I'm sure there was a lot of computers running those to
Yep.
open them properly. Marty, what you got there, buddy?
Well, we got a question from Dave Stange. Actually, he worded it like a question, so we're good. Anyway, can Gary talk about his most memorable or exciting experience he ever had working on at the Space Center?
Okay. Your most excitable or memorable experience? There's
Well,
quite a few to choose from.
well, there's quite a few to choose from one I thought I was going to die, to, but really the funnest thing was flying in the Huey helicopter with the Vietnam pilots that just came back from Vietnam. That was most exciting. That was we used to have called e-tickets at Disney. That was an e-ticket. When they flew us down the beach, about 6 inches off the water, he said, "You want to see it fly? You know how fast we can go?" And he got it up to 140 something knots. And then
In a Huey helicopter.
In a
What
Huey-
was the circumstance?
when they launched Skylab, they lost the solar panel and the meteoroid shield. And they came by the office one day and said, anybody want to volunteer to go in a Huey helicopter to go look for it out in the ocean?
There we go. There's the space connection.
Yeah. So I said, okay, I'll do that. And another guy by the name of Joe Funky, he said, I'll go with you. So they gave us flight suits and a helmet. And we went out behind the headquarters building, and there was a Huey sitting there with 3 people in it. You know, you have a pilot on the right-hand side, the co-pilot on the left, and a flight engineer in between the two of them. We hopped in, they opened up the doors, and then they strapped us in so we could just kind of could hang our feet over if we wanted to. And we went up to a place called Playlinda Beach up there and circled around and just kind of looked around in the grass to see if we could see anything. So then we flew out to the ocean, and we flew out, and then we got to 3 miles offshore, and the pilot looked around at us and said, "Now, this is by regulation. This is as far as we can go because we're in a single engine helicopter. We don't have any flotation devices. So if we go in to drink, it's going under." And so he says, if you ask me, I will continue on. And so I looked at Joe. I said, "Joe, what do you want to do?" And he says, "Hey, I'm for it." And I said, "Me too." So I said, go on out. So we flew out. We didn't get 60 miles is when you get into the Gulf Stream. So you'll see a greenish water, ugly looking water to a nice blue water. We didn't get that far out. I think we got about 30 miles. And he said, "This is as far as I want to go." So we turned around and came back. Then we went back. He said, "Let's go back to Playlinda Beach." The pilot said that. So we were down on the deck flying around, and he saw a rabbit. So he started chasing the rabbit with the helicopter. And then after he did that, he found a gator sitting down on the beach. So he flew over it. Of course, it went right underwater. And then he saw this duck flying across the horizon. He turned around and says, "Watch this." And he took that helicopter and got right behind that duck and started chasing it. And whenever that duck would move, he would go with it. And that duck would actually turn its head around and look at us. You could see its eyeball. And it did that for about 35, 45 seconds. And then finally it dove into the trees. And that was the end of we went down to down to Cape Canaveral and Cocoa Beach. The pilot says, "You want to go see these swimmers swimming with sharks?" I said, "Yeah, I don't understand that." So we flew down there, and sure enough, you have the water line to the sand. You have the people surfing and swimming, and just about another 10 feet beyond them, there's this big row of sharks just going back and forth, back and forth.
Really?
Yeah.
We've seen that in drones now with people talking about
that was unbelievable. I said, I would have never believed it, but I'll be more cautious when I go to the beach. But they're out there. So, and it wasn't one or two, it was about 20 of them going back and forth.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's
that was one.
Well, thank you for asking that, Dave Stange out there. Anybody else ask a question here as we're doing an open mic with Gary Allgire, a little bit of structure here to talk about something. But the pictures we had racked up there didn't actually, we did tell Marty that we loaded up some more pictures.
Oh, okay.
So. But we're going to segue from the top secret spy plane. Just put a button on that. These are very important to our nation, aren't they? These type of
Yes.
Spy satellites and spy planes and so forth.
The people, the military and the civilians that are working for those agencies that are in charge of to keep this country safe, they are really, really dedicated to make sure that happens. And so they put these items up so that they can make sure that we can do what we do and have our democracy and not be surprised by having somebody attack us we don't know about. And it was, for me, when I worked with them, it was exciting, but I was also impressed with the dedication of these people.
The Department of Defense
Yes, yes.
space.
It's not like
division
if
in
you
there.
see on the movies and the TVs where they kind of make us, the military, look a little bit dumbfounded. But these guys are very, very smart. You better have, when they ask you a question, you better have the answer.
Huh.
They don't mess around. If you don't, you're out of there.
We better believe we have some important assets orbiting the Earth to
Yes.
protect our country
Yes.
and our friendly allies also
Yeah.
in there. And that's what makes America great. And so watch this launch sometime Sunday on a Falcon Heavy. And of course, what's cool about that is the boosters are coming back
Coming
to the
back.
landing zone on Cape
Yeah.
Canaveral.
If you're here, it is amazing, especially if you go out towards the beach. The sonic booms that come off of that when it lands will scare the heck out of you.
Yeah. Yeah, I was on the beach for one come
Yes.
back. That was pretty loud for sure. Well, let's look at something else here. A new rocket, Gary, the Vulcan. United Launch Alliance is looking forward to their maiden flight of this though it's a single stick rocket.
Yeah.
It's got more power than the Atlas V that they just retired. Okay, on there. And I don't know if you can put the side boosters on this or not. I don't think it's designed for that. I think it's
You don't know either.
but it's going to launch on Christmas Eve, 1 in the morning, December 24th. It's going to launch this spacecraft called Peregrine, or Peregrine, like the Peregrine, like the fastest hawk on Earth. Peregrine is one of 5 payloads that's on it, and this is a NASA aided mission with some interesting things on it. It's not landing at the South Pole, and we're going to talk more about that, of course, as we get closer to that. Anything to say about the United Launch Alliance?
Well,
And they launched most of America's spy satellites.
Yeah, it's. I'm glad to see this because he has built a huge facility out by the Visitors Information Center.
He being Tony Bruno.
No, I was thinking of Bezos, but I guess that's not his.
Yeah, no, this is United Launch
Oh,
Alliance.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, Bezos owned.
Yeah, the New Glenn is what we're waiting
Yeah.
to be launched on that.
And Bezos, didn't he just buy ULA?
Did he just buy ULA?
That's what the rumors were.
Really? Tommy Usiak, you heard that? Or Carlton Bailey, that
Yeah, he supposedly bought it.
Bezos is buying the United Launch Alliance? That's an interesting twist.
Yeah.
You're right, though. The complex around the Space Center is just incredible.
Yeah.
From 5 years ago when it was just a
Well,
wasteland.
that was NASA's goal, was to build up an infrastructure that was not government but was in private industry.
And a lot of the old timers around here that worked at Cape Canaveral, I'm talking Mac McDonald and we Murphy Wardman
Mm-hmm.
that worked out there for years, and Jack Martin, who passed away. They would say, how's he going to move his rockets because there's no roads there? Well, guess what? They're building like a 6-lane road around the
that
visitor
area.
center, around that bend, like you're not
Yeah.
going to believe,
That's right.
to haul this gigantic 300-foot New Glenn rocket. Marty, you got a question?
Yeah, I've got a question from Bill Whiting. Gary, what is your most memorable interaction with an astronaut while working at KSC?
Well, in a way, as engineers, we don't really talk to the astronauts, other than during a test. We'll be on a headset, and they'll be on there in a crew compartment or in the shuttle, and you could talk to them when you're doing certain sequences. You tell them what sequence you want them to do and what switch to flip and stuff like that. So, and when they get done with their testing, they immediately get out, and they got a tight schedule. Their training is so intense that they didn't have time, at least in the Apollo program, to sit around and talk to us. I did give tours to newbie astronauts on the shuttle program that were not manifested, had just either were still going through their program training or they were just finished it, and they had not been assigned a shuttle mission yet. And when you could joke with them, you could talk to them, and they would always say, "Boy, I'd give my left arm to fly that shuttle." And then when they finally got manifested, and you see them, they were not jovial anymore. They were dead serious, and you couldn't joke. But as far as meeting them and talking to them, Sally Ride is my favorite. I did get to meet her and talk to her up in Toronto, Canada, when she was doing the development procedures for the arm before we flew the arm. And I got to meet her there and talk to her and shake her hand. And Ellison Anazuku, I got to talk to him at a picnic, and he came over and talked to us and said a bunch of things to our kids, and that was always appreciated to that. And of course, Ed Mitchell, is one, and Rusty Swiker when he was here.
Yep, I meant to put a picture of you and Rusty up there. We'll do it next time you're here. We got Sally Ride's handprints in here.
Yes,
She's quite a petite lady, I understand.
she was, and I mean, she was so kind. I really liked her. There's more to her, but we can talk when I talk about the Challenger, what she did on that.
Yeah, Gary's going to do a special program with us in January, on January 25th, in fact, where we're going to have him address all three tragedies that he was actually space worker during the Apollo 1 and the Columbia and, of course, the Challenger disasters. And we're looking forward to that. We always take the high road with those tragedies and honor the lives of the fallen heroes. And Gary, we're going to look forward to Gary actually telling you more about the causes and some things that don't always come to light in all the voluminous books and conversations about our nation's tragedies. So we're looking forward to that with Gary on January 25th. Marty, got a question on that UCAC family microphone?
Yes, we do. We have one from Tom Usiak. Gary, why do we have such severe pogo on Apollo 6 and not on the first Saturn V, Apollo 4?
I don't know if I could totally answer that. I don't know why they didn't have it on that. I know they had it on 6. It was very serious.
Describe what pogo is for people who don't know
Pogo is just
what that's about.
the impulses of the engine start fluctuating, and it sends a shock wave up and down the rocket, and it can get serious. And in fact, it got so serious on a 6 that they said if the crew had been on board, they had died from that
Shaking them around, huh?
shaking it up and down, violent shaking. And on the SLAW, the spacecraft to the lunar adapter, which would have had a lunar module in it, but it wasn't because it wasn't a moon mission. The panels, the 4 panels, one of the panels separated and fell off. Not the whole panel, but the outer skin came off, and that was a big concern. And I'll talk about that at a later date of what we did to fix that. But,
we were talking about yes, the Apollo 6, the uncrewed Saturn. What an amazing mission it was. 5 also.
And I think one of the other Apollo missions, I don't know which one, it may have been 13, that also experienced some pogo effect.
Huh.
I guess it wasn't totally corrected. They did it by alternating the sequence of starting up the main engines.
So you're riding your motorcycle, Harley, right?
Yeah.
What would pogo be? What would be an analogy of feeling pogo on a motorcycle or in a car?
It's easy. It's called whoopie-doos, though.
Whoopie-doo.
Yeah, when you're at a dirt bike, and you'll see them, it's when the dirt gets dug out and you got a bunch of ups and downs, and you go across those, and they take you and they just do this to you.
Okay.
And that's the same as the pogo effect, really.
There you go. I knew you'd have a motorcycle analogy, my friend. Good. Any other questions, Marty?
Not yet.
We're going to talk about Apollo 6 on a program with Gary here. It's really an amazing mission. And then to the next all-up Saturn V took us to the moon.
That's right.
A huge decision on that in 1968 in December. We got a couple other things in space history to talk about. One is the launch of Gemini 6 on December 2nd. I mean, Gemini 7. And then this is actually Gemini 10 where we launched rockets the old-fashioned way. Ready?
Yep.
Pull.
Hit that button and let it go.
That's right.
Unfortunately, one of them didn't go.
Then here are the astronauts that are in orbit in space history in 1965. On the left, Jim Lovell and his crewmate Frank Borman, the commander, we lost Frank at age 92 about a month ago, and Lovell lives on. And you'd like to think someone's reminding him about the 14 days in the tin can with his good buddy up there.
That would be tough. I don't see how they did that because there's no room. You know, they had lightweight spacesuits on, very lightweight. In fact, they didn't have a glass helmet on. They had a plastic shield and made out of cloth. But they
actually rode to orbit with those crash helmets on underneath the other thing. I know, just to think about you and me sitting beside each other, you know.
I don't know if we're that good of buddies.
I mean, I'm telling you, you know, you could say it easy. 14 days orbiting the Earth in less room than you have in any front seat of vehicle that you own, and yet alone all your bodily functions, all your you got to have an element of stress with all the noises going on and wondering what's that in a new spaceship and day and night 17 times
around the Earth.
Holy cow! I mean, these guys were something else. And then they flew together on Apollo 8.
Yeah. Well, they had more room in Apollo 8, which was nice. But anyway, that's 14 days in that thing. I wouldn't be able to do it.
What I find interesting as a structural engineer is how close that gull-wing hatch was.
Yes,
There was just an inch above their heads, really.
That's right. Yeah.
You had to look out those windows all the time.
In fact, originally when Gus Grissom was in charge of designing that cockpit, and he was 5'6", 5'7", and he had this thing that was down perfectly because he had a lot of experience flying his jets, and he wanted the cockpit to resemble a jet fighter.
Mm-hmm.
So he put that all in there, and they brought everybody in. Guess what? All the taller astronauts couldn't fit in it, so they had to go back and redesign what he had done. So that's how tight that thing was.
Actually called the Gus Mobile.
Yes.
And here is one of our heroes there, General Tom Stafford, at his wonderful Air and Space Museum in his hometown of Weatherford, Oklahoma. I've been there 4 times, Gary. That's an awesome museum.
Yeah.
I don't think you've been there, have you?
No, the only one I've been to.
That is the GT6 that was launched December 15th to chase down Gemini 7.
Yeah.
And you look inside these, if nobody ever has, and hope you get a chance to, it looks just like a fighter pilot cockpit.
Yeah. It even had injection seats.
Yeah.
That the astronauts did not want to use.
Did they continue those all through 12, or did they take them out at some point?
No, they were all in there. That was the only.
Yeah, that was the only ejection in abort scenario at launch.
Max Fugé, who designed the spacecraft, he did a study. He went out and he studied all the Titan rockets that were being developed, that they were exploding. He got all those films. And he looked at those, and he looked at the Atlases and the other vehicles, and he discovered that fireball was not near as big as the other rockets. And so he was in favor of launch towers. He said, why am I taking that extra weight and then throwing it off right away? I want to put injection seats in there. He says, based on that fireball, ejection seat would get him clear. And that's what that's why he did what he did. Now, Tom Stafford was very upset. Well, all the astronauts, they didn't like this ejection seats. One, they had to do a weight and balance with the injection seats before they got installed. And they laid on their backs for hours while the technicians and the engineers tried to do the correct weight and balance. Once they got them in, Tom Stafford said, if we ever launched ejection seats at the pad, he says, what you'll see is 2 Roman candles. And the reason he said that is they're sitting in this spacecraft with pure oxygen. Yeah. And what happens with pure oxygen, eventually it absorbs into your clothing.
Oh, yeah.
So when that rocket motor fires off, that would ignite all their clothes. And so you would see 2 Roman candles being launched. And that would not. So they did not want to. And I thought one of the missions where the they started to launch, and the engine fired, and there may have been a
GT-6A, yeah, Stafford was on that.
Yeah.
Sherrall was beside him as a commander.
and one of them was going to pull the ejection cord, and the other one said, "Don't do it."
Yeah.
We just sit here and wait and see what happens.
Yeah, Wally Sherrall said he didn't feel anything in his butt like
Yeah,
he did on
yeah.
the Atlas, and
That's right.
that D ring was about to be pulled and ejected there
Yes.
by the mayor of Pad 19 there, who ended up having General Stafford had 2 flights within about 6 months of each other. Because of the death of Elliott C. and Bassett.
That's right.
Um,
They were the backup.
there's the general there. I believe he's 93 years old now, Marty. Somewhere around there. Buzz is 93, I know.
Yeah.
I think Stafford's 92.
Buzz ought to be
And
94.
he does
pretty
live
soon.
here on the Space Coast and pops up occasionally. You got to see, your bucket list has to have his space museum. It is awesome. It's got so much Russian stuff from the Soyuz program,
Okay.
including about 10 autographed vodka bottles from the crew all over the place. Yes, on there. But love catching up with some of this. Just we're gonna go out here a little bit with some fantasy pictures, so to speak, of the way some concepts were quickly. Gemini program, there was a concept to put a Gemini lunar lander on there. There's a photo artist concept of that. We were really wanting to get to the moon, but not just to win the moon race. We all thought we were going to habit the moon,
Yeah.
like a
colony.
Antarctica
Yes.
base.
Yeah. And actually, McDonnell built a mock-up of that to show NASA.
Did they?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And of course, it never came about. And then my first supervisor, Harry Schoaf, in the mechanical group, he pulled me aside one day and he pulled out a hand set of drawings that he had drawn, and he came up with a one-man lantern lunar that he was going to propose to NASA.
Huh.
And of course, it never came about, but it was kind of like a little. You see these guys flying around in a chair with a propeller on the back.
Yes,
and the
yes.
carousel. It was about that size, just a little 3-legged thing, and it sat on there. He had an astronaut.
Like an ultralight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he had designed that back in the 60s to go to the moon with it.
And they thought that there would have to be a way to hop around.
Yeah.
With the success of the helicopter on Mars, Ingenuity has changed the game for even China looking now at drones.
Drones on there?
But there's a drone that's going to the Moon Titan of Saturn,
Okay.
where the atmosphere is 4 times the Earth and 1/7
that's-
the gravity, so anything will fly around.
Oh,
on
yeah,
there.
that sure will.
And that's a game changer, these drones and so forth. Threw this in here just as Gary being a structural engineer to look at the 3 spacecraft that were our steps to the moon. And we've gone back to the capsule. There's our Artemis 2 crew and the Orion spacecraft there. Gary, should we have never abandoned the Apollo and used that as a lifeboat?
I don't know if it was, evidently you could go back and forth, but it wasn't. If you're gonna colonize the moon, that vehicle is too small to do that. And people, they just flat lost interest in the moon program after we landed on the moon. Everybody said, "Why are we going back?" And unfortunately, we're dedicated. We're saying, well, there's still a lot of research out there. There's a lot of things we don't know about the moon. And I know when they said we're not going to do it anymore, 17 would be the last one, we were all kind of down. And we kept saying, when will we ever get back there? And I tried to envision, when would we get back to the moon? And I went to 50 years. And I said, yeah, we'll be there before 50 years.
I know it.
But it's not going to happen before, it's way past 50 years now. But it's
2027 is now what the government
Yes.
accounting office is saying. Good luck that 2027
And,
Artemis 3 lands on the moon.
when we get into Apollo 13 and talk about what happened there, they did the right thing, and I'm not sure they're doing the right thing now. They had a lifeboat going with them, and they never realized that a tank would fail and do the damage that it did to the spacecraft. if it wasn't for the lunar module, they'd never come back. And that's important. And I hope they've learned that lesson. So when they go to the moon the next time, they have a backup in case there is an unknown failure that they had never planned for.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a concern for me after looking at Apollo 13 and see what really happened. I mean, it's quite involved what those crew members went through to go that. The movie didn't show all that,
Mm-hmm.
and what the ground crews did to make sure they were safe, what decisions they were made, and we'll talk about that when we get to Apollo 13.
Gary's going to do a program on that for the snowbird flies north up there in the
Yeah.
springtime here. Well, Gary, we love talking to things like this on the space program, resurrecting the Titan rocket that launched Gemini with what on it? The dinosaur. This was a real concept, folks, of a space fighter orbital vehicle with one or two astronauts in it. And it was, you know a little bit about it.
Well, all I know is it was very popular at the time, and I was very enthused about it as a young boy to say, hey, they're going to do this. This is cool. It's like an airplane. And unfortunately, it just never came about. Again, Congress got involved with the cost and said, no, we're not going to pay for that. There's still a lot of unknowns. We did do, a prototype. And this is, again, we didn't know a lot about aerodynamics as far as coming back because, basically the shuttles originally had jet engines on them.
Yes.
And they were thinking it would fly back just like an airline. And then they got to thinking, well, that means I got to have aviation fuel on board. I've got to have these engines in there. That's all additional weight. How are we going to handle it? And if it wasn't for the out at Edwards Air Force where they did the not the drop test with the what do you call them? I'm losing the word right here.
ALT, approach and landing test.
Well, no, they did the vehicles that they didn't have propulsion. They just glided in.
Oh, right. Yeah, the H
the H
series of.
That taught them that they could fly a shuttle without engines.
Yes.
And that's I forget the name of the program, but
well, this obviously looks very similar
Similar
to
to
the
that.
X-37B that we were featuring today, and of course the shuttle and the asset program was one of the first that used re-entry surfaces, testing those. So, but this space plane and this whole concept by the Air Force of having a mini fleet of maybe 20 of these on standby all the time was from the 1960-62 era, and then the MOL, Manned Orbiting Laboratory with Gemini, was a parallel program with Gemini for a while, and then that was canceled.
That went pretty far.
And because the Air Force, the military, they didn't see the use of humans anymore with the technology of the spy satellites.
That's
correct, Gary?
Correct, yeah. Now, a question: why they have the big fins? That doesn't make sense to me because
Werner von Braun he got his hand on that.
Yeah,
right,
I guess
Marty?
I don't know.
But the fins, we understand, on the Saturn V are useless, correct?
They all are. Goddard, when he was launching his first rockets in 1926, realized that fins didn't do anything. And he knew that. So you got to use the engines as the gimbling.
So there's a story of why the fins are on the Saturn V.
Yeah.
And you know what that is?
Yeah. Von Braun says every rocket's got to have fins. That's his design. He's got to have fins. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And
it's sort of an ornamental
yeah,
on there for sure.
That was one of the first things I asked when I went out there on Apollo 6. I said, these fins don't look like they don't move. And the guy goes, yeah, they don't. I said, well, why are they there? He says, because Goddard said,
Von Braun
said they had to be.
Is that right? So you actually asked that question
I asked
too.
that question to a tech, and he had the answer.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. You go talk to the man to take his fins off his rockets.
Yeah.
Well, here was a concept maybe some of you've never seen before. One of the first of the shuttle era. What's going on there, Gary, as we're ending our wonderful conversation?
That was the original idea of a space shuttle for a complete system that was totally reusable. And what they had was not only just the orbiter having humans in it, but they were also going to have a flyback booster, which would be crewed. And they would go up until they ran out of fuel, and they would glide back down to the landing site, and the orbiter would continue on. again, the budgets that was given to NASA precluded that ever being developed.
Amazing concept there.
Yeah.
Somebody has kind of copied that. Okay, think of Virgin Galactic
Yeah,
in their catamaran style
that's true. Yeah.
mothership that takes their galactic spaceship up to suborbital up there. So, well, Gary, there's our International Space Station orbiting the Earth, 7 astronauts on it. We got 3 Chinese on a smaller space station, continuously occupying Earth orbit for 23 years.
That's
what do you think
amazing.
about that?
That's amazing. I would have never thought about that as possible back when I started with working for NASA. That was
What's it a testament to?
that's a good question. That's a testament to mankind and the prevalence to explore and to push the environment and element. To someday we're going to colonize maybe another planet.
Mm-hmm. Well, I look at it a little different, Gary. I look at it like it's a testament to what you and Marty and Space Workers has established as the procedures and what has to be done, because you and people I interview give me a greater appreciation that putting humans in space they're making it look easy, but it's not.
It is not. It's not easy going back to the moon. And I think there's a quote there. Somebody said they'll learn. I think it was Gil Ruth was on the beach and he was talking to somebody. He says,
Gil Ruth, one of the manager of the Apollo program.
They'll realize how hard it really was to get to put man on the moon. And right now we're struggling as far as some of it, but I think Elon Musk may beat everybody with what he's doing if he gets that thing working, which he will. He seems to push on, and he's got the money to back it. So
well, that's how he got his Falcon 9 working. It had 18 failures or so, and well, he's got more time to launch them, blow them up, and refine them, because the government says they ain't going to the moon before 2027.
Yeah.
And I feel bad for the astronauts that are training, and one astronaut, the Starliner, so far behind of Boeing.
Yes.
And here 3 astronauts have been waiting for that ride for 2 years.
Yeah.
One of them, Suni Williams, that spent a lot of time on the space station, and Butch Wilmer, another shuttle astronaut. And it's hard to hang around, I think.
Well,
I would think. What do you think?
Yeah, it is. Well, they went through that with the shuttle. Shuttle was going to last, launch maybe 2 or 3 years earlier than it did.
Mm-hmm.
And those astronauts that were going to fly, they had to wait around also.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just part of the job now. Is you get assigned, but we don't know for sure because it's not mature enough yet to say we can guarantee you'll fly on this date.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what you sign up for to be an astronaut, unfortunately, and you have to.
And what really drives those timelines, Gary? What really drives the timeline of yes, we're ready?
It's a lot to do with the engineering and how well they do the engineering. There's a lot behind the scenes that we as engineers at the Cape never saw when you talk to the people who actually designed it. What they go through and hand off this part and that part. Being an engineer back at the design facility, you are working on one little small part. And there's nobody really other than the manager somewhere that's got the whole picture, but you're assigned one little thing. I had a roommate that went to work for Lockheed, and he was an A student. He went there, that was a goal to go to Lockheed. And he was there a year, and then I got word back that he quit and wanted to become a lawyer. They put him in the wind tunnel, and all he did all day long was document numbers on the wind tunnel, what the readings were off of it. And he would have to do that, and it's like any new business. When you go in, you're at the bottom, so you get all this stuff nobody wants, and you have to take time to work your way up. Same thing in the military. When I went into the Navy, I was doing
swab the deck,
swabbing decks, waxing floors with shoe polish. I've done that.
Shoe polish.
Yes, in stock. And I had to clean the barracks. We did that, I think, twice during my training years. But you start at the bottom, and then when I went into the VA squadron, again, you're at the very bottom until you get a rank. You just do the garbage jobs. I'd clean urinals and stuff like that.
And the space industry is a little bit like that.
Well, any really business is like that. When you
Yeah,
go in
it
at the
is.
very beginning, I was fortunate that I had a really good senior engineer that let me do what I wanted to do. I wasn't much on the paperwork side of it. He liked to do the paperwork side, and he just let me do all the mechanical work, hands-on stuff. So that was a good marriage of two people working together.
Well, Gary, any final thoughts about what we've talked about today?
No, but
Spice satellites, the Apollo era, shuttle legacy.
No, there's one thing I do want to point out. We have a lot of people come in here and talk about how great our museum is and the stuff we have. Even Rusty Swiker was here saying, this is really a nice place. One thing we do not emphasize, and I think it's the most important thing, it's in this, besides you, at this museum, is the docents. You got Barry, Gordon, Jim, myself, and I think there's a Steve. And these people, when they come in here, we take them, and when they leave, they have a really good understanding of the history of the space program. They're very, very important. We're lucky to have them.
Absolutely. Thank you. We're lucky to have you as a docent, my friend. And if you're local and want to be a docent or help us out, please let us know here.
Oh, and Anita, she's good.
Yeah, Anita Truex, our office manager, docent. She's our docent wrangler, Marty. Anita is, and yeah, she is. The way she talks to everybody that comes in, and constantly, Mark, you got to meet this person, and I love it, and it's just amazing to just show up. I never know where my day's going to go, except that we're going to do Stay Curious at 4:00. And thank you, my friend, for coming in at the last moment. I thought he's here. Let's talk about something that Marty and I've been wanting to do. Get a little Q&A going, and just casual conversation, because we've got some people that said they'd love to just come on and turn on the microphone and talk, and some of those people are launch director Mike Leinbach and Bob Seek, another launch director, and on some people like that you're going to hear more about as we get more guests on Stay Curious. Marty, we have anything to button up over there on our Streamlabs production? All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you all for your questions today. We got Gary Gerald's watching in Georgia, up there in Collins, Georgia is where he's at. You know where Collins is?
I should.
A lot of Vidalia onion world up there. Tommy Usiak, thanks for your question. Ophelia Sauterel, she's watching in Normandy, France.
Okay.
And Neil 1030 is watching. Thank you. Bill Whiting's up in Michigan. Doug Forrest is outside Pasadena in LA. And Connie McDaniel, our winner of the question, what shuttle was flown west? And that is, of course, Endeavour, when it was put on a 747 and headed west to be on display out there at the California Museum. That I hope one day Doug Forrest will send us a picture of what it looks like once it gets fully stacked up there. They're putting it on end. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, they're putting Endeavour.
Oh yeah, they're putting
they've got some real SRBs that they just stacked and some sort of ET.
That'll be interesting, but we had that sort of at the visitor center at one time when we had the shuttle out there, and we had the ET tank, and
it was laid horizontal kind of. This is going to be vertical.
I mean, the tank was vertical and the SRBs were there.
Oh, gotcha.
And the shuttle was it was sitting there by the side of it.
Well, thank you, my friend.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
very
Thank
much.
you.
Always a wealth of knowledge, just a smidgen of what he knows and shares here. And you come to the museums. What days are you docenting?
Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Tuesdays and Thursdays. So Gary will give you a good tour.
Until April.
Until April, that's right. And then he goes up and has some fun in a beautiful God's country up there in Georgia. Well, thank you, everybody, for watching. Taking your time to watch Stay Curious today. We thank Gary Allgire for always what he does. Marty Winkle, another fabulous volunteer here and doing our show today. If I look up on the wall, this is about show 945th episode, Marty. Whew. and we're still trucking along. So tomorrow we've got a guest with us, a gentleman whose name I forgot to bring here, and he was a Gemini engineer.
Oh.
So we have a guest tomorrow. We're going to talk more Gemini with this gentleman. Until tomorrow, I'm Marquette saying we can't wait to see you again to bridge the space between us.